election results, but the point is, politics are not always just played out at the ballot box. Sometimes, too, it's played out on the streets. And we're seeing that, downtown Manhattan on Wall Street. There's been an occupation taking place for about 2 weeks now, and it seems to be gaining in momentum, popularity, or currency, however you couch it. But there's talk now of this coming to Toronto. And on the 7th, no, it's the 15th of October, a week from tomorrow, there's a group called Occupy Toronto. So sort of riffing on the same Occupy Wall Street, they'll be occupying downtown Toronto around the banking district at King and Bay Streets. And the co-organizer of Occupy Toronto, Thomas Zaugg, has joined the Oakley Show in studio this morning. Thomas, good morning. Good to have you on board.
John, it's a spectacular day for talk radio.
Oh boy, you've read your notes well, my friend. And all right, so Thomas, he's obviously very much immersed in what's going on now. A guy who follows the business beat is our own Ruth Skis, AM 640 business analyst, and he's joined us again on the line this morning. Good morning to you, good morning to you, Luke.
Yeah, good morning, John. Thomas, great to be with you.
Thomas, all right. Well, Thomas, let's not be dismissive of you just out of the gate.
No.
But tell me, Thomas, because people are kind of curious as to this phenomenon. I think we've got some idea of a genesis on Wall Street, but why do you feel this is necessary, and what's the point or purpose to occupy downtown Toronto?
Well, one of the main issues is dealing with the Canadian banking sector. We have many laws on the books that actually require the Bank of Canada to be printing legal tender and then spending it into existence. If you take a look at the Bank of Canada Act from 1934, this is when we brought in this form of currency, which was in the midst of the Great Depression, and from 1934 to 1974, which is where we started issuing principal promissory notes to the IMF and having the IMF print off legal tender and loan it to us at interest. There's some very interesting statistics when you look at that. You take a look at our national debt. The entire amount of money that this country has borrowed on loans from 1867 to 1993 was $37 billion, and the debt level in 1993 was $423 billion. That is the worst loan business deal in human history. And so that is what this occupation is about. We're furious at the very fact that our currency pretty much means nothing. In the past there's been bear markets and bull markets. I'd say we live in a BS market right now.
So what do you want to do? You want to peg it to gold or something like that? I mean, Nixon took us off the gold standard in the mid-'70s. So are you talking about going back to that or some?
It's part of the occupation movement is a global movement, and although I'm just one voice, I'm one voice of millions of voices that have ideas to bring forward a brighter future as far as living on this planet cohesively as a species. And I think part of that would be clearing out a global financial market that is actually equitable and fair and doesn't have these rising inflation rates and interest rates that make...
All right, so the global financial system is a rigged game, is what you're saying.
Essentially, and many people within the occupation movement also take the position that they've already established a form of global governance, and if you take a look at the Occupy Wall Street Declaration, they point to that, and we are well aware that our democratic process is being manipulated by economic and financial influences. Just a brief example. I mean, I ran for MPP in Parkdale. And I had a total of $80 to spend on my campaign, and I got 55 votes. And most of my campaigning I did at the debates, and I did really, really well in the debates. I expressed a lot of great ideas, but it seems like whoever has the most money is able to kind of get the most signs and the most...
So that's not true democracy. So money carries the day, and that's the point and purpose behind... By the way, were you part of the G20 protest?
I was.
All right.
I was. And
for the same reasons.
Yeah, I mean, the G20 is again kind of part of this global banking sector. I mean, these are the 20 richest nations around the world that are going and deciding exactly what happens, and then you take a look at this inequality that we experience between the decadence here in the West and the poverty and starvation in third world nations. And from the position of most people within the occupation movement is we just don't see why it's like that. I mean, we've always been fed this false promise that.
All right, so they need to be, the banking system globally has to be uprooted and reformed. Over to you, Mr. Skeezus. Where is our young friend Thomas Zaugg wrong?
Well, I think getting involved in politics when you only have the support of 55 people is the first place you're going to find some problems. The other thing to consider is that we don't borrow money from the IMF. We supply money to the IMF as a lender of last resort to countries that are in financial distress. Now, when you talk about fractional reserve, it's the way of creating money in order to expand economic opportunities. Before we had a fractional reserve system, we had a 100% reserve lending system. So whatever you had in the bank, you could lend out, or whatever deposits the bank had on deposit, they weren't allowed to make loans. And that constricted the economic opportunity for many, many people who wanted to expand and borrow money in order to grow the opportunities ahead of them. I think a fractional reserve system works in terms of providing liquidity, and I think if you're going to go up against that, you're going to find it fairly difficult to convince anybody to go your way, because it's a complex issue that's not easily distilled, Thomas. So if you've got political ambitions, I think you need to find a simple message that people can embrace, as opposed to, I read your comments on the John Oakley Show website at 640, and you said, well, it's not my job to get people to vote for me. That's exactly what politics is.
No, I think politics should be actually about trying to put forward ideas that are in the interest of all people, and I think you should be able to do that in an honest fashion that's direct.
Constricting the available capital in the economy is not going to do anything for anyone.
But, Lou, the argument that somehow, the most recent economic meltdown precipitated by these rogue bankers and, investment houses that were selling really pie in the sky, with the derivatives and everything like that. To Thomas's point that the banking system needs some kind of reform or to be uprooted.
And that's true, John. In the United States, that's where the problem began. You notice we didn't have that problem here, because our bankers maintained a certain amount of diligence when it came to extending loan capital, either for homes or businesses. They still insisted that people had the resources to pay their loans.
Thomas?
Well, I mean, we still have this unmitigated amount of interest on a $37 billion worth of loans. I mean, that's $386 billion in interest. That's almost 7 times the principal of that loan. That's worse than a used car deal. And that's the deal that all of Canada is getting on its money supply. So I do understand where you're coming from about the personal aspect of finance, where people need to be able to have access to credit to be able
and
to...
they have to pay it. You can't just have
course.
access to it. You have the responsibility of repaying your loan.
Okay, why don't we just come back in a moment and take some calls in this one, because, again, Thomas Zaugg is the co-organizer of Occupy Toronto. They're going to be occupying downtown Toronto a week from tomorrow, Bay and King in the business area, right around the banks and all the rest, because there are grievances against the banks. Is it legitimate to protest against the international banking system or the one here in Canada? And do you support the Occupy Wall Street or Toronto protesters? Do you believe their grievances are legit? 870-6400. Let's take some calls. Lou Skeezus representing on the business interests as our analyst, and Thomas, of course, the co-organizer, Occupy Toronto. 870-6400. *640 if you're on cell. 744. Let's head out to the roads. Updating